Okay, good morning, everyone. We should be live if this worked out correctly. We are what? I think we just made the joke that China Talk coming live to you from Seoul, Korea. Of course, in Korea, everything's about unity, everything's about being selfless. So, in inspiration of that, Kelsey and I are sharing the same box. We're sharing the same headset. We're sharing the same microphone. This is perhaps the jankiest setup we've ever done. It's pretty crazy. We're in our hostel, so we already apologized beforehand if we have some drive-bys. We actually have a live audience over to the left of us. But again, let's just introduce panelists. Of course, I'm Froskern. I'm going to be your host, LPL Shoutcaster. With me, literally right next to me, is going to be Kelsey Aaron Moser, Karen Moser on Twitter, of course, representing On Gamers.
You just let out
spoiled everything.
That's the whole secret.
my entire
Spoiled the
secret.
mystery.
And then joining us from not Korea because he's not cool enough. I think there's an alarm going off in the background.
Yeah,
Is
there's a car alarm.
is Drexen representing? Okay, excellent. Representing esports heaven. I know I think the last time we did the show, it's been OMG versus Najin White Shield, and then of course OMG versus Starhorn Royal Club. I don't want to go too much into the Najin White Shield game, but I know Kelsey, you did want to make a couple points and kind of gloss over it before suck a little OMG dick before we completely rip them apart. God damn it, boys, you had one job. But no, let's just go into the Najin White Shield game. Like, give me your bullet points. What happened there? I mean, pretty convincing 3-0. I think it's the first time a team has 3-0'd a Korean team since you said this. Oh, is it ever?
Like, the 3-0 doesn't happen. Hasn't really happened.
Well, I mean, beating a Korean team in a best of 5.
Yeah, beating a Korean team in a best of 5 since, like, World Elite, more or less. Yeah, so it's that was a pretty exciting set. I think a lot of people were surprised. It was probably Ann Prague on Twitter who made the comment that, okay, we can't just like take our B-rate Korean teams to tournaments and dominate anymore, and this is unfortunate.
Wait, whoa. So now Naja gets to be the B-rate Korean team?
Yeah, they're the B-rate Korean team.
Okay, I understand that, Najin wasn't performing up to expectations. Like, obviously, I've made this statement countless times across like the Daily Breakdown and various interviews with Travis and everything. Like, I don't really know much about Najin. I don't have a complex history with them, but everyone was telling me, oh, Najin, they went through the gauntlet. They had
they had like 3 good sets. There you go.
But that's the thing. Like, why was that the hype riding in? Like, I made this comment, and I'll make it again here. I'm disappointed with myself for giving it to Najin. Like, I think I was probably the most vocal in the last time we did China Talk as far as repping a Chinese team. Like, I was like, really, but I still gave it to Najin. And I feel like I only gave it to Najin because they're the Korean team.
I gave it to Najin White Shield because of like their most recent performance and the fact that I also definitely expected OMG to not sync up as quickly with Cloud as they had before. So I still think that the comment I made with the knowledge I had like made sense to me because I was also at the time like the one counter there is that EDG didn't show up, right? And I was sort of saying, okay, Najin White Shield and EDG are going to show up. And then EDG already hadn't shown up, so I thought, so I probably should have thought, But the real story is that OMG showed up.
No.
Like, no one expected that shit, right?
Before we go into this, Mike, I actually want to give you this question, because Mike, if you can for me, can you, like, detail, like, as... And I want to use quotation fingers, but I'm holding the microphone in place, so I can't. Like, can you give me like the analytic? Like, how do you break down analysts when you are judging, like making predictions for a team? Can you go by and just quickly recap the thinking? Like, what are the bullet points that you're covering? Like, because obviously a lot of the Chinese and like a lot of us we predicted EDG, and of course now the Western fans are like, well, tell me about EDG again. Like, tell me how good they are.
Haven't we done this like 3 times though? Talked about like why we predicted EDG?
No, I'm not saying like specifically EDG. I want him to like give me a formula. Like, when you're making a prediction, why did we predict not to? Like, what was the factors that went into it?
Okay, so it's actually quite a few things, but out of the things that I can predict, it did make more sense for Najin White Shield to win because basically the topics are different for most people, but I would say recent performance, emotional fortitude of the team, practice regimen of the team, like roster swaps is a big one, like how used to a new member they are, which Cloud I just did not perceive to come like be able to 3-0 the team with him just like hopping on board. And I'm trying to think of a fifth one that just eluded me that I was thinking of right when you asked the question.
No, I'm thinking like historical context, like as far as predicting Cloud, like you said, like there's no international experience, so there's no way to say, he performs this way. He didn't have a huge history with the team. He didn't have a lot of statistical backing to him.
And in addition, I just wanted to point out that usually when teams like hit a slump, they don't like do this thing up here and then kind of like they like usually do this downward thing. So I thought like even if White Shield was like way above where they could usually be, like up here, like they might be like down here or something, which might be enough for OMG. But they kind of like, not to take anything away from OMG because they played really great, but to get 3-0'd like after their performance and gauntlet they had in Korea was something that I think was almost impossible to predict realistically.
I think. Yeah, the OMG and Najin White Shield, both of the OMG sets that happened kind of are really, really about the emotional aspect, because I feel like after OMG made that crazy, okay, we're tired of this Korean shit, we're gonna go for Baron, and they made that call, like that call probably sent White Shield on tilt, like really hard for the rest of the series.
Hashtag just tilt them.
Like who knew that both OMG and Starhorn and apparently Samsung White read Reddit, right? So
okay, but this is the well, first I'm going to ask you guys this. Do you guys have a good context and kind of like perception of Najin White Shield and their history as a team and their power? Like, am I good to ask you guys questions relating to that?
I know that
decent.
I didn't follow OGN groups too much, but just from the playoffs, from what I know, is that they've been like historically very adaptable. Watch has usually been a weak point, but up before the gauntlet. But the thing is like Grillo's always been really good at taking over the roles that he's not capable of very well, like vision control and like just map control and stuff like that. And in addition, like Zephyr was a weak link, but they found ways to like manipulate the way the bottom lane plays together so that he can be effective still. But I think the thing is that was very exposed, and it wasn't necessarily a secretive thing. They didn't have that like key component to help make that bottom lane thrive like they did in Korea, just because like the whole Janna thing with like shielding and sieging and backing off was so common in Worlds, like that wasn't like really a wild card for them. So they lost that going in, which I think was a pretty big deal. In addition, like obviously one of the biggest things is Save just didn't show up and going far outperformed him, which is a huge deal. They usually rely on Save for those big performances.
And again, I'm like really glad that you like broke that down into like individual like playstyle things that you think happened for them. But just give me, so now that you've kind of like defined like analytically, this is what I use to make like predictions. Like, and we've kind of covered like OMG. Like there was no way to predict that because Cloud didn't have a history, that there was an emotional instability in the team, that there wasn't any like really statistics or historic context to pull to cater to this, of course, like a Korean team never being 3-0'd. Like, come at me now from Najin White Shield store, like making that prediction as an analyst for Shield, like everything that they had going for them.
Again, like they played, and I feel really weird about this because I feel like every team that's tried to do like this split poke work around the team fighting composition kind of thing hasn't succeeded. Like OMG tried to do it against Starhorn and it worked for a while, but then they went and fought. Shield tried to do it, but then they went and fought. Like this keeps happening. Then Blue even tried to do it, but I don't think it was so much that Blue went and fought, just that they fell so far behind.
No, but like give me like history.
But no. I'm saying that, but historically, that kind of composition is something that they've been successful with, like the split push, use the minions, don't like 5v5 engage, like the Janna disengage. Like that was another thing, is that they were missing some of that disengage component. And people want to go into the picks and bans thing, right? And talk about how, especially in the third game, Najin White Shield, they weren't used to that composition. And I agree, that's like not the style of composition that they often play in terms of those specific champions. Like Gorilla isn't typically known as the best Nami player. It's like kind of one of his fallbacks. We had Save doesn't play Maokai, right? All this other stuff. And when I looked at those compositions, like the Najin White Shield composition is much more of an OMG composition, and the composition that OMG picked, and I think it was Crisley, our guest last time, who even said that type of composition is something that Najin White Shield loved to run and ran like all through the gauntlet. And oh my god, how did OMG get it on red side? Like holy shit.
Yep.
So but like you could have reversed those compositions, and OMG probably would have been happier to play the other one. So
Yeah, and if we're talking from a historical context, like the thing with Samsung White, if you're looking through their eyes going into OMG, like I can understand almost getting a little bit complacent if that's what it was, because they're like, okay, we beat SKT to get into this tournament, and last time OMG faced SKT, it was a slaughter, and we know how OMG tilts after a poor performance. So, I mean, Goon got Zed, like they got pretty decent champions, I'd say, for their comp, and they didn't end up like winning game one. So I think after that they were kind of like, oh god, we can't like use this mental advantage against them that OMG typically has if they lose a game or whatever. At least this is what they could take from
that
All-Star.
Statement typically, actually, I think this is the first series where we've seen like them as a team really tilt like the Star Wars series.
I can agree with you, but the thing is, I'm just talking about through the context of Najim White Shield and what they've seen and their history with them seeing the history between OMG and SKT.
I do agree that it was obvious they weren't very researched in terms of.
So here's a really big fun fact as we do go into the OMG versus Starhorn Royal Club. Mike is a big Starhorn Royal Club fan, and Kelsey is a massive OMG fan. And so I'm actually hoping that there may be a little bit of tension here and some argument, because typically Mike and Kelsey just, yeah, I agree. Yeah, you're smart. You're smarter, bro. High five
no,
each
you're
other.
Pretty.
No, you hang up first. But before we do that, I kind of wanted to make a little bit of a segue, and it's kind of like a reach, but I feel like I really wanted to address this on China Talk. And Mike, you were just talking about, Najim White Shield, they had a history, beating SK. I always say SKT to get here. And like the fact that OMG has never had a good showing, and we always joke,
No, that would be TSM beating SK to get here.
And we always joke that all of the Chinese teams, like, they don't care which Korean team shows up. They want Faker to show up because they want, like, the revenge against SKT. So let's, like, obviously no one's going to make the statement that the OMG 3-0 would then mean that OMG can beat SKT. Like, no one's going to draw that parallel. But I feel like we're constantly getting statements like, if we had beaten SK, TSM would have been in the finals. And here's, like, the fallacy and logic that I just kind of want to go. Like, to make that statement, I think, Kelsey, you said that pretty much underhands every single Chinese team when you make that statement. Because, yes, if they have beaten SK, of course they for sure would have won the tiebreaker against Starhorn Royal Club. And then for sure they would have won the best of 5 against EDG. And then, of course, after they won the best of 5 of EDG, they for sure would have won the best of 5 of OMG. So, yeah, TSM totally would have been in the finals if they, like...
Totally.
I didn't say anything because I've been, like, defanged on Twitter trying to be, like, a little bit more calm. But, I mean, Mike, Kelsey, I want to start with Mike because I actually haven't gotten Mike's view on that. I was sitting next to you when you got it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ignorant to think that anything is going to be 100% until results actually happen. Like, people can always analyze and say, well, if this, then that, but that doesn't matter. What matters is the results. Obviously, that doesn't mean, like, predictions or, theory crafting is useless by any means, but just to make, like... It's easy to say, like, this will 3-0 this, or this will win against this, and especially if you're coming from TSM like Amazing is, like, that you're going to make that kind of prediction because you're confident. And, I think just from Loco's vlog before Worlds, the team was very wired to believe that they had no problem against Chinese teams. Their only threat was Korea, just by, like, the way he was speaking. So, yeah, they probably considered their loss an upset. I don't know, but... The thing is yeah, you can't just make those statements and be so sure about it until it actually happens, and it didn't. So, just sounds like something salty to me. I mean, yeah, I don't really have to go too deep there.
Okay, so okay. Well, first of all, I think they didn't beat SK, so that's kind of a silly. Like, if we had just beaten this one team, kind of statement, it's like, okay, you didn't.
SK were the gatekeepers to the finals.
Just think about, like, the mind games that, like, SK almost didn't even mind game TSM, like, with the base open. Candy Panda happened to be split pushing, and they probably didn't even consider that TSM would just, like, walk into the base and wait for them to go in. And I don't even know what they were doing there. It was really weird. But the mind games that we've seen OMG play with, like, the teleport and the shit, and it's just like this.
You're referring to the Najin White Shield teleport on the Baron?
The teleport, when Going teleported to the ward and Gorilla put down the Nami bubble to go off as soon as the teleport went off, when Going was actually just right on the other side of the pit and canceled his TP and then just walked in as soon as they started Baron because they thought he was in the base, like... For me, TSM isn't a very cerebral team, and you don't typically think of Chinese teams as cerebral teams, but the way they were playing like that split push composition against Starhorn, and they got that huge lead, the way that Cool was thinking about his TF play when we think about the TF escape, where he knew that,
when he yellow carded Uzi Eye's Twitch because he knew that the damage was coming from there and then knew that he would have enough time to port.
Right. And so just like that kind of split-second decision-making, I haven't seen a lot of that kind of thing from TSM as a team. And I just want to look at those OMG and those Starhorn games and those EDG games and just say to yourself, I'm the better team is like, for me, it doesn't make any sense. It's almost like saying, okay, if we had been on the other side of the bracket and gone against Blue, we'd be in the finals. Like, based on Blue semifinal against White, I think that's even makes more logical sense than looking at the Chinese games when obviously it doesn't make any sense at all because Blue won't necessarily play like that against TSM, and Blue had a very good series against Cloud9, and no one would dare to make that statement, right? Like no one would.
Well, the one thing that I do want to kind of correct on is I do think it's like when you were speaking specifically to like the Cool play with like the Twisted Fate gold card, like we've seen a lot of things like that from like Bjergsen. Like he has a very high skill cap as a
obviously player. But I'm just saying, just like that's why I corrected it and said as a team, we haven't seen like the kinds of map movement mind games. Like we very much see them do well off of lanes and team fight a lot. And I think I'll probably get a lot of shit for this, but I feel like that's a very classically Chinese way of playing, and I feel like that's how they play.
Mike, what do you think? We're talking about TSM without defining their play style. Because I think I've seen a good mixture of like cerebral play but I am in Kelsey's camp where I feel like TSM is very much a team fighting team, just because of the strength of kind of their individual players. I think outclasses a lot of people in NA, like Bjergsen specifically, I think is incredibly talented. Lustboy.
You have Cloud9, which is the more cerebral, sneaky team. Sneaky team.
Nope, Mike's turn. Shut up.
You have
Nope,
TSM.
Mike's turn.
Okay.
Mike.
Okay, so yeah, I'll just go ahead and say that despite people thinking I hate TSM, I will say that I think in terms of like prep work, TSM's among one of the best teams. So when we're just talking about macro strategy and like preparing for a team specifically, like their game plan beforehand is like really good. And I think that showed up in their second game against Starhorn Rail Club. But at the same time, like that alone isn't enough against some of the top Korean teams. Like you mentioned, Blue, if the matches would have been swapped, I would have suggested a 3-0 just because a lot of the way Cloud9 came even close to winning a second game against Blue were those kind of like on the fly plays that were kind of like intelligence required, like in the middle
plays.
of the game. Yeah, like the ones that were kind of like you kind of have to think fast, like in between the game, right? And that's something that high shot calling provides that I think Bjergsen's doesn't yet. So in terms of preparing before the game, sure, TSM has an edge there, but I don't think that they would do well in a situation where they have to make decisions on the fly from behind. And in that set, Cloud9 played from behind the whole time, and I don't think that TSM is as good of a team at playing from behind. They're historically always been a team that's been really good at capitalizing on leads they already have.
Okay. But so final thoughts, because I know we should just have to like define this and put this out here. Rank the regions.
Korea,
I
China,
know
Korea, China, NA, EU, GPL.
Okay.
I mean, like, I hate doing this. Like, I always say that, but I mean, like, it's happening every year. Like, every fucking tournament. It's the same standings in that order every time. Well, NA and EU, I could put, like, greater than or equal to. Like, equal to probably. Like, EU, I mean, EU and NA, anything could have happened in the group stage, honestly. Like, really. So I don't really want to say NA greater than EU, like, despite results.
You're
but
making
like,
the statement that China is over them because of results. That's where this is coming from?
yeah.
Consistency.
Like the last 3 international tournaments they've been in, except for fucking Katowice, but we don't talk about that because that was IG and World Elite when they were like shitters. So I'm
when
sorry.
they were
about that.
shitters and they'd never played on the patch, right?
Yeah, that was when they were on like 3.15 and like I don't even know. I think like Katowice was on like 4 point something.
I think that there is definitely, like, obviously the results speak for themselves, but I definitely think that there is an argument, because unfortunately there's not enough international exposure and overlap. Like, we don't have enough international tournaments, which of course, like, Riot trying to monopolize on everything, and everything's like a Riot controlled tournament. I mean, there's pretty much, ESL tournaments and like Riot tournaments, and that's basically it. Do you think that if there was more international competition, that the West would start to pull, ahead or pull closer to the top, or do you think that it's always going to be this stagnant? Like, I want to define like what these characteristics is there something innately about like the Koreans and the Chinese that make them better, or is this an infrastructure issue? Is this because like the Chinese are closer to the Koreans? Is this play style meta, like where, not based on results, because obviously like results say that China is second best, but like what is giving them these results?
Well, hey, let's just get DreamHack back on the circuit and have more international tournaments. Like, come on, that's easy. But yeah, I mean, I said at the funny thing is, I said at the beginning of the split that it was very possible that North America could be better than China. This was during spring, so this was like several episodes back. But I did cite that as a possibility. But I think one thing that you can never take away from Korea and China is just that both of them have absurd work ethic in comparison, just because of cultural differences. Chinese teams not as much. Like some of their teams are a little lazier than Korean teams, obviously, and that's why when that's why when they brought over Koreans, they're like, holy shit, these guys have insane work ethic, and it was kind of a motivating factor. So yeah, if that happened this year, I could see a case where North America could be better than China. But now like you have like Cacao and shit going over to China. Like I don't know, man, it's looking grim for the West, honestly. But it's still possible. I mean, we are slowly building up the infrastructure, but then the infrastructure in the East is also building up. It's not like North America's in this like little sandbox and like everything around them has just stopped for them to catch up. Like they are also progressing with them. Like that's something that a lot of people overlook.
And I want to say that I actually have probably a weird opinion on this. I think that the Chinese infrastructure in terms of like how it's set up is actually a little bit closer to North America and EU, to be honest, than to Korea. It's just that they play an absurd amount of solo queue. It's just that they have this absurd talent pool, and that they're working but they have had like the basis for infrastructure in esports for a longer time. It's just that just now with the West, it's starting to beef up more, but they have had like the groundwork in China for having the teams, having the coaches, like recognized on stage for a while with like Dota and a bunch of other instances. And they played StarCraft, obviously not as good as not as well as the Koreans. Yeah, so I want to say that it's the sort of the interaction with the fans on stream and everything is very much similar to the West. And I want to say that in terms of like the player responsibilities versus the coach responsibilities and how much control some of the players have in the team over the coach is actually some more similar to the West. It's just that they've had like the basis for infrastructure for a little bit of a longer time. And now that they're getting these Korean imports and they're starting to change the infrastructure and beef it up a lot more. And so that's what will give them the edge going forward, even though in the past they didn't have that much of an edge in terms of infrastructure.
I'm going to make a statement as a coach for League of Legends right now, because this is something that I've kind of had like discussions and was kind of baffling to me. When a challenger team unseats an LCS team to break it into the LCS, I find that honestly shocking, because I look at the resources and the facility available specifically to like my players and my team. That's incredible. Like we have a whole coaching staff behind them. It's not just me. It's like 6 other people next to me. They have like dedicated practice times where they're supposed to be there, show up. We help establish like communication, like break down all of these things for them, trying to crunch numbers for them, like all of the resources available and the infrastructure that we're creating behind them to just allow them to focus on their mechanics. And like a lot of the time, challenger teams don't have that. Like obviously there are some challenger teams that really put in the infrastructure, get into the gaming house, like working hard, but some of them like don't even have like regimented practice schedules. And that is baffling to me that a challenger team can upset like an LCS team who should have like this mechanized performance machine behind them. And so I think it's very much like now you just elevate that to like Korea versus like the West. Like there's nothing, it's not like Koreans have like 6 fingers and they're just able to play the game better because they're Korean.
Yeah, it's not a genetic advantage.
It's just like genetic. No, it's the like what the coach said, they have like like 3 computers that process and crunch numbers, and then like the coaches, like they have coaching staff is so talented that they have them breaking down the numbers and saying like at this point in the game this is this power spike for this specific items, that these players have like these small tidbits that they can pull and just make themselves like I talk about it with my players, getting rid of variables like in communication and thought process, because the game is a game of milliseconds. So if you can just streamline consciousness so it's just like reactionary play and skill, like that's what you want to get to. And that's the thing that I think makes the Koreans better. And if we're talking about like infrastructure issues, like if North America and Europe could just get to that level where it's just the players playing the game, and if they had as much talent at the keyboard as they had, standing behind them, because I think the coaching staff for Korea, as we see like all of these Najin guys, like look what the guy did with TPA, like in the weakest region right there, and TPA had a decently good showing. So I don't know. I just wanted to like make that statement as we were talking about infrastructure. I think that there's an argument to be made there, but we're gonna go ahead and go to a commercial, and then we'll come back and do OMG versus Starhorn World Club. And we should be back if everything went correctly again. Welcome back to China Tech. We just got back from our commercial break, and we're now about to go into the Starhorn Royal Club versus OMG set. And this should be good because, again, like, Mike is a big Starhorn Royal Club fan, and of course, Kelsey is a huge OMG fan, and we all know how that ended. I first want to, because we've been talking a lot about in like setting up the pace of, how do you make your analysis? What are the kind of the bullet points and things that are important when, making predictions for a series? So I actually want to start with Mike. Mike, I actually think that you gave it to OMG.
Yep.
Okay, so break me down, like what was the mental thinking in making the prediction for OMG there?
Well, firstly, I made it after the Dada switch, obviously, but I think a lot of it is history, just coupled with how OMG's momentum was going into the match. I think if it wasn't so convincing of a win against Najin White Shield, I would have guessed otherwise. But I think player for player, most of OMG's roster is honestly better, which I think was like the big thing because, how do I say this? Yeah. Okay. So in solo, I feel like both solo lanes are problematic for Starhorn Royal Club when compared to OMG specifically, and I do think Cool played one of his better sets against Starhorn, up until like the last game where I feel like he choked pretty badly. But yeah. So going, I pretty much just figured would just crush Cola, and that would draw Insect top instead of being able to gank bottom as much as he would like to, and just like pretty much remove San from the game. At least that's how I envisioned it going. And for me, that was like one of the biggest factors, is I figured that they would try to get Uzi I fed, and that couldn't happen with Cola having so much pressure top in a 1v1. So that was the biggest mismatch for me, because before making the prediction, I had to say like, okay, these teams are ridiculously inconsistent. Let's see how they show up. Going obviously freaking showed up. OMG as a team obviously showed up. Starhorn Rail Club, like, they were like shaky, I guess. When I saw the group stage, like I was like, okay, these guys are playing the best they've ever played, but it still felt like in comparison to how convincing OMG played, that it would be a bit problematic. And I didn't think that they would consistently keep that performance the whole tournament up into the playoffs. And then I reminded myself, I was like, oh yeah, Uzi and friends always gets the buff at Worlds. So I know Kelsey like hates me saying that, but every fucking time, like,
I mean, I will say
it's a
Uzi
completely different
gets
team,
above
but
Worlds.
Uzi gets ridiculous at Worlds, but it's just. See,
Okay.
here's the thing. I'm not like a huge Starhorn fan, but the thing I just love about them is that their history literally repeats itself every season. Like now, Zero saying he wants to join an NA team, so there's like the inevitable collapse coming after their second place at Worlds, and that's gonna like start all over again with Uzi and friends, and like they're gonna pick up like 4 amateurs or 3 amateurs in a Korean, and then they're gonna like come back and do the same shit, and that's just like, oh my god, it's so fascinating to me. I love it.
And again, while he's making a statement, I feel like we do this all the time, but like it cannot be overemphasized. Like Starhorn Royal Club was not this team at the beginning
No.
of the split. Like when they first got together, it was awful. I can probably count on one hand how many bolas Rengar or insects Rengar actually hit over the course of, and his record on Rengar is like what, 14-2?
No, it's 15-2. Like this split, all the time it's
How does that
13.
make you
It's
feel,
17-3.
Jackson?
Like we talk so much shit about his Rengar, but the fact that he's 15-2 in LPL Summer and Worlds on it, it's really.
No, but
Wow.
like Starhorn Royal Club was not this consistent
It's
of a
just like,
team.
damn,
Like
son.
they're like on the decline, and then they slowly just start rising up. And then like Mike said, like Uzi shows up at Worlds, and suddenly he's just a freaking god. Like and people are like, oh, Uzi's the best AD carry. You know, Name's so overhyped. But like it. I mean, how many times do we see Uzi flash into 5 people and instantly die? How many games of Starhorn World Club were thrown because Uzi face checked into a bush or didn't position properly? And I don't know what it is. He
That
just
was-
like he gets on the world stage and he just like puts on his big boy pants.
That was always my favorite statistic is like until the 8th week of LPL Summer, Uzi had like 40% of the team gold with more than like 20% of the death. So he was dying more than his share. And he had like far more of the share of gold, and that's why they had trouble like winning some fights sometimes. So,
But so that's how Drexen made his like. So now Kelsey, like, tell me, like, obviously, if you match up across, of course, like OMG, you know, going versus Cola, you're gonna give that to going. Cool versus Corn. So was this just an issue of that Corn and Cola played at like that much higher of a level? Like, do you think that they were the difference there, or are you going to credit this victory for Starhorn World Club to Uzi or to Insect? Because the thing is, like, no one ever doubts Uzi at Worlds. Like, he's going to be a consistent rock. So what was different this time? Was this OMG throwing? Because at some point, is it one team playing poorly, like in Samsung Blue versus Samsung White, or is it one team just playing incredibly well?
I want to start. I think it broke down to 3 things. One, I do think Cola and Corn probably played one of the best sets we've ever seen them play.
Yeah.
So I do want to acknowledge that. I also want to say, though, that I think another factor was OMG psyched themselves out a little bit. We saw the interview with Going where they said, you know, Starhorn historically beats us. Like, this is kind of like we saw them come out with that first game, right? And it was terrifying. And they had leads in the second and third game. Like, arguably, this series could have also been a 3-0, but they kind of freaked themselves out a little bit.
Yep.
One of the biggest things, though, I want to say is historically, OMG has won this set in the jungle. Historically, between Loveling and Insect, and that has been like the linchpin.
I also want to give some or I just also like, since there's a lot of people that are Loveland haters and are like, oh my god, I can't believe you'd say he's better than Insect. Like, Insect is playing really well at this Worlds, but like Insect at the start of the split literally just ran to the enemy jungle and died repeatedly. Like, I was like, holy shit, this is a downgrade to KMI. Anyway, you can continue. I just wanted to point out how bad it was in the split.
Yeah,
I think the first game he was ever, I think literally his first game in
yeah.
China, he played Rengar. He walked into the enemy blue buff to invade at like 2 minutes and fed first blood.
and this was against Young Glory, right? So whatever. The
Welcome to China,
the
Insect.
7th place LPL team. Anyway, the point is that like and Twitch chat, whatever. Did you watch Loveling played that series? He played really well. Like, screw you. Anyway,
I'll touch on it after
screw
you're
you, Twitch chat, but like Loveling played well.
I think Loveling's been
Loveling has
statistically
played
solid this tournament
Loveling
too.
has played well this tournament. I think that Okay, so back to the point where, and this is where I will give credit to Insec, and where I will give credit to Starhorn Royal Club in the jungle, because they did win this jungle matchup, like fair and square for sure.
Of course, the OMG
And
fan here is pretty much saying like, oh, it was OMG's game to lose that they threw it to Starhorn Royal Club.
no, I'm saying that like Starhorn came prepared and they beat them like in preparation and mentally, and it was OMG has historically won this in the jungle by like OMG will always their strategy is always to target the jungle in some way or another, either through invades with like deep warding or through picks and bans. And then against Starhorn Royal Club, they have won by banning like the Lee Sin and the Rengar. And we saw them ban those consistently throughout the series. Starhorn probably knew that was happening because OMG does this against them all the time. And that's why we saw like them come out with the really weird Fiddlesticks pick, the really weird Pantheon pick. And I think it was the Little Susie OGN Global interview with Uzi where they asked them, like, did you play these picks and scrims? And they said, no, but we've been playing them a lot in solo queue, kind of like we knew that we might have to use some weird stuff. And like that's where they won, is that they came knowing that OMG would do this. They hadn't shown it in scrims, they hadn't shown it anywhere, and they just like came prepared with it. And that's where they won the series. So good on them.
Yeah, on my take on like the matchup overall, it's like I'll disagree a little bit with Kelsey here because I do think that Leveling played a good series. However, I feel like his Lee Sin play was a little underwhelming. Like I don't think he actually got off any proper insects when he's actually usually very good at that. I feel like he went in and soaked for his team, which was good. But as far as like huge playmaking, I feel like it was a little off. Additionally, I will say that I think OMG just mentally collapsed in Game 5. I feel like they got scared and they went like way too safe. Like Starhorn Royal Club was like kind of went in like, okay, we just need one more, and OMG was like, oh my god, let's not lose. If you know what I mean? Because like they went like they were experimental with it. Like they went the Rise mid, they went Pantheon jungle, and then OMG was just like, oh cool is just like, I'm just gonna fall back on Orianna, and it was like. I don't know. It felt like it was weird because Ari was not banned, so he could have picked Ari or something.
Or Zed. I mean, I want to clarify.
Ari or Zed. So.
And people come at have said repeatedly like OMG didn't know how to play that composition. It's like, no, OMG has historically played very well with those champions in that kind of composition. Like we've seen, like people ask me why didn't they ban Janna instead of picking it, because Cloud actually played a really good Janna against Nudge and White Shield. Like it's not that his Janna is bad typically, and Orianna is actually one of Cool's top 3 most played champions with the best like record of all time. So he knows how to play Orianna, and until this series, Going was actually undefeated on Rumble, so like that's gone. But I'm just saying that they know how to play this composition, they know how to play these champions, and they've done so. Like they have a really good track record of doing so. They just like didn't, and there's no excuse for that.
I just feel like they were really reserved in the 5th game, like, and it just bit them
they
in the
were
ass.
they were scared, yeah.
I think when we were coming home from the game and we ran into Chopra on the subway, I think he made like a really good point. He said that OMG in the 5th game played it like it was a 3rd game. Like they didn't go in for that mentality, and the fact that Starhorn Royal Club pulled a late game oriented, like because in the 5th game that's do or die, that it's probably going to be a very conservative style game. It's going to be slower paced typically because no one wants to make those early. You're not going to risk it on a level 1 invade snowball. And the fact that like OMG positioned like that, I think was a big factor. To me, it looked like that Cloud wanted to play Thresh and like didn't get his Thresh pick and was forced onto Janna. And I don't know, like communication broke down. The Janna ultimate was so important that game because of the Maokai. Literally, there was never a 5v5 where the Janna ultimate was used effectively against the Maokai ult.
And I know they wanted to ban the Twitch, and like this guy's Twitch record is pretty good and everything, but I do think they would have been better to ban the Janna. And again, like hindsight is 2020 because there was really no indication that Cloud would choke on that pick. So,
or that Cool would choke on the Orianna pick.
Yeah, or Going would choke on Rumble. Like his Rumble in the 2nd game, I think, wasn't that great, but it was really good in the 1st game. Like his Rumble ults were really good.
So I'm tired of patting OMG a little bit and being like, oh, guys, you just because I want to give it to Starhorn World Cup because I feel like you did kind of touch on it.
I do. I think Starhorn came with the better game plan and it showed. That's all.
I wanted to give just a shout out to Insect's depth though, because I know you talked a little bit how this matchup typically goes into the jungle. Can we talk about how he played 4 different champions out of a 5-game set, pulling out victories on Pantheon in fiddlesticks. Like, talk about champion pool
Channeling
depth.
that illusion.
I know, right? I saw that. I was like, holy shit, is that illusion? Didn't go 08 though, so not quite on illusion's level.
Both split. Like, I was really hard on him for his pool because I think the reason why he gets targeted is because of his pool. Like, his pool was pretty shallow, like, all split. He had that 15-2 Rengar record, and he had a pretty good record on Lee Sin, but everything else was, like, negative, I think. And he, in the Kazakhs, was, like, 4-7 or something. But he didn't really play a lot of everything else. Like, he didn't play Elise that well. His Elise was pretty abusable. His Jarvan, like, we saw them abuse his Jarvan really well in the first game, and I think the misconception after the EDG series is that he can play Jarvan really well, and I think he has had some good Jarvan games. It's just that he's very hit or miss on it because he will play it. He will always go in with to get those risky cataclysms, and that doesn't always work out. Like, his Jarvan play is kind of hit or miss, so OMG knows how to abuse that. And I've been very critical of his pool, but they worked on it. They knew that that was a preconception that people had, and they mind gamed them on that, and I thought that was really great. So,
Mike, do you have any other final thoughts that you want to kind of touch on the Starhorn World Cup versus OMG before we get into predictions and wrap this up?
No, I will say I totally agree that that Starhorn Royal Club showed up in the areas that where people might have perceived as weak points. I mean, yeah, he's inconsistent Jarvan. I think Insect's kind of inconsistent in general, but definitely on that champion. So yeah, they did a really good job wrapping it up, and I just feel like OMG. I want to say almost the last two games, like it was a lot more obvious in Game 5, but OMG just choked where it mattered. Actually, I would say their Game 3 and Game 5 were my least favorite out of OMG, because I think Game 3 was where Gagoing played the really unconvincing Nidalee. Like, he was like kind of like, oh, I'm gonna go split push, oh, but my team might die or something. Like, I don't know. That's the conception I had. Like, you know, when you're like that solo queue and you're like smurfing as Nidalee and like Silver or something, you're like, oh, I want to go split this when my whole team might get ace. Like, he was kind of like walking back and forth. That's how I felt. I was like, it seemed like he was really uncomfortable in the split push, and so yeah, I just think like if OMG had more decisiveness in this set, they would have won it, but they like doubted themselves for whatever reason. It was kind of disappointing.
Isn't Nidalee like 0-3 in this tournament? Like, I don't think Nidalee has won any games.
You muted yourself, Mike.
yourself.
Sorry, I'd have to check. I honestly don't know off the top of my head, but I would be surprised.
The times I remember, like, Blue played it and Shield played it, right? So, and both of those times that I remember, it was about as convincing as when OMG played it.
Either way, Nidalee's not played in China at all. I think Ninja played her.
Actually, it was Xiong.
Oh, Xion played it? Okay,
Yeah.
so that's how far back we went. Predictions, because I know, Mike, you have to get going pretty soon. Predictions for Starhorn World Club versus Samsung White. And I want to go with the, but here's the thing, and here's like the one point that I wanted to make. So like, we've been going with like kind of this motif, if you will, of like, how do you make analysis? What are you looking at in teams when you're making these predictions? Like, what is the critical thinking? And like, the thought was that if you match up across every single lane, OMG versus Starhorn Royal Cup, that OMG outclasses them specifically in individual players. Like, obviously, when you match up across pretty much every single lane, White outmatches Starhorn Royal Club. But Starhorn made the upset. And I understand that you can make the context that, well, White's, you know, above OMG, but I really think, like, at this level of play, like, OMG, when they're playing at the height of their skill caps, yes, White has, you know, better players, but it's not head and shoulders better and above. Like, Going is one of the best top laners in China. Like, I agree.
Actually, I think the interesting thing is like when we were talking about Starhorn patching up their issues, I think one of the things is they were a very momentum-based team in China, and so like they kind of needed a lead to continue it, and they didn't like show that vulnerability against OMG, because even in the early parts of the set, OMG would be ahead in towers, but Starhorn would be ahead in gold. So technically, OMG would be overall ahead in map control, but they'd still end up winning. Same deal with same deal of surprise with how they would give up dragons to OMG, which is something they typically wouldn't want to do for the first dragon in LPL, right? So I guess that does make it a little more unpredictable, because Starhorn are showing that they're not completely at the whims of like what people would conceive as their weak points. So I guess that's something. It's just, man, I think it's not so much that oh god, China versus Korea finals, like history, they're gonna get crushed. It's just like White's been looking very monstrous, and I think even against Blue they haven't really revealed much. I feel like they were still like kind of
I mean,
I
they
don't know.
did.
It almost still
They
felt
got
like
all of their
disrespect.
picks. They didn't
Like,
have to like branch out any sort of play style because they got the same thing pretty much every single time. Like think of
yeah,
how many times
the
they got
thing,
Jace
yeah, that is true. That was unacceptable. But at the same
or
time, they picked like a
Rengar. Like
Kali. They picked like a Kali into Kale. Like the new white game, blue new white game was or white game. Why am I saying that? Blue new white Samsung White was like an early game team, but they were like banning out Tristana and stuff. I don't know. I felt it was really weird, but yeah, maybe my understanding of those two teams just isn't as high as it needs to be. But it felt like White didn't get to reveal their full strength, but at the same time, you're right. They did get away with Jace twice, and yeah, it was kind of I don't know. It's just hard for me to find a situation where Royal Club wins that set, but I won't say that they'll get crushed 3-0. I mean, they might lose 3-0, but I don't think it'll be
as
like Royal Club
depressing
versus
as last year.
SKT. Yeah, exactly.
I want to I just touch on one more thing before I go into my. I just want to say I'm really proud of Starhorn Royal Club because throughout this split they have never managed to beat both Edward Gaming and OMG in the same tournament. So like that's really great for them. So yeah, I just wanted to say that that's like really cool. That's an amazing Cinderella story right there. And just like how much of a gamble that roster was. Like Cola was from a 15th place LSPL team out of 16, right? What is that? And Korn like was on
and
a
he
team.
gets to be in the final at
Yeah,
World.
and Korn was on a team that didn't even make LSPL, right? So and Zero, like there was no indication that Zero would be like the gem he turned out to be. Insec was kind of like starting to falter. Like you could argue that Insec was the least of the gamble of their summer pickups, but
Still on the decline in his career as far as like, past and current performance.
like I just think
KT members are just coming home to the borders of China, and then they're understanding their place.
I just want to say that what that team has accomplished to me, like for being like the roster that they started out with, is really impressive. That said, I do think that White is probably going to make them not look very good. I don't know how devastating it'll be. I predict it'll still be pretty devastating, to be honest, but they've consistently surprised me so far in this tournament, so we'll see how that goes. And as I've said before, my predictions this series is this quarterfinal and beyond, like after the blue versus Cloud9 and the white versus TSM games, my predictions have been awful. I have incorrectly predicted every single series, so yeah. Hopefully Starhorn can prove me wrong again. But anyway, my logic for why White will win, across the board we see the players like play very similar styles very similarly. It's just that White does everything Starhorn does better. Like Starhorn wishes, I always say that Starhorn wishes that they played as crisply as White because they pretty much play the same style.
Define it. Define the style for White quickly.
Okay, the style is pretty much like snowball, monster, play these like really
Early skirmishes.
early skirmishes really well, control and mind game the jungler, go for some of these invades, some of these like, and what I've enjoyed seeing them do almost consistently is get the advantage in the top lane and then go ham in the bottom lane because you have the TP advantage. Like that's something that I've always really admired about how White sets up like their snowball. And so I think that they do all of those things a little bit. They lay their groundwork for their strategies better than Starhorn, and that's like a huge. Even if you don't go player by player, that's a huge place where they're going to win.
Drexen, any closing thoughts on your prediction? She's going to give it to Samsung White. I think she said 3-0, but not a crushing 3-0.
Yeah,
a 3-0 isn't crushing.
That's pretty much
No,
what I
I
feel. Like I don't feel like they're going to be like super unclose games all across the board. But I will say that we can compare them playstyle to playstyle, but that depends on if it's like perceived playstyle from like LPL or if it's like their current Worlds playstyle, which is varied up a little bit. So I mean, maybe a curveball will make them able to take a game off them. Uzi certainly surprised to like crazy levels. I do think he's probably 3-1. I think it's possible that White could get cocky and that could allow them to lose a game. I mean, TSM took a game off them, so it's likely.
I mean, it is White.
And TSM is like clearly better than Starhorn, so just kidding. But yeah. Yeah, so like it's hard to make a prediction just because of like what I know versus like how they showed up is completely different for Starhorn Royal Club. So I'll say in their current state, I'm still gonna say 3-0. I hope I'm disappointed. This is why I like making 3-0 predictions in against China because like I'm so happy when I'm wrong. So I'll just go with that.
Yeah, and that's what I've said consistently. Like every time I don't believe in OMG, they prove me wrong, and everyone like taunts me on Twitter. It's like, okay, I really don't care.
Okay, so we have our predictions. I think, Mike, you definitely have to get out of here. And of course, like we're in a hostel, so there's a lot of background noise. So we're going to sign it out. Shout outs, Mike, start with you. Do you have anything?
Uh, yeah, apologies for the short show, guys. It's my fault today. But otherwise, no, not too much. I hope you guys continue to have fun adventures in Korea.
Yeah, can we talk about Korea? Korea is amazing. The
Yeah, you
venues
guys.
are crazy. Meeting all the people is like amazing. Like the best thing about this entire trip, like obviously going all the way to South Korea to see Chinese teams, but just to meet our peers, like the most amazing people that we've gotten to sit down with. And it's not even just like the big name people, which of course is like very cool to see them because they're a lot of them are really cool like in person and very laid back as opposed to just like their online personas and personalities, but like the guys behind the stage and everything like that, like it's been phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, go to Korea.
Go to Korea.
Go to Korea to meet people who live in your country. No. And we went to Korea to see Chinese teams, right? So that's our thing. And of course, seeing the Samsung semifinals, even though it was a 3-0, was really cool to see the Samsung semifinals in Korea.
Yeah, I don't know where your guys' broadcast like cut off or how much you saw about the Samsung games, but like after the games were done, all the players got up and of course like Dade like gave him his jacket and they all like hugged
Yeah,
and,
that was
and
awesome.
stood with their hands and like put him up and after the Chinese games they like immediately go their different directions.
I will say, aside from Game 5, you guys have probably had the privilege of seeing the best possible set with Starhard versus OMG, so that was really
Oh, it
cool.
was good. It was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
And
crowd was wild.
I want to, as usual, give out a shout out to Garvey. We went out and hung out with him last night. Shout out to Pyrotechnics, who has been our silent audience on the side. And also, just like, I want to plug a little bit of content. Like, I've referred repeatedly to the OGN Global interview between Lil Suzy and Uzi I. If you guys haven't seen that, that's like quite possibly my favorite interview of Worlds. Just because Uzi I just looks so happy. He was like, "Yeah, we didn't have no plans for the finals. We didn't expect to make it. Oh my God, this is amazing." It's really great, and he's just like smiling, really ear to ear. Like that kind of thing makes me really happy to follow esports. So,
Oh, but yeah, I think we're done. So, wave, Mike, wave.